little ones. Can I put that on the altar? Not on this one. You can put it on this one.
Okay.
Remember to turn the sound down on that.
Say again?
Turn the sound down on that.
Yeah, I did. It already reminded me. I have a Melody online.
Hi, Melody.
I have a Cherie online.
Hi, Cherie.
I have a Maria online.
Hi, Maria.
Hang on.
And Amina.
And Amina in my lap. Say hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
All right. So welcome to the Seat Lamina show. The star of the show just walked off, so I, Gold Eagle, will have to fill in for her again. So I'm going to pick right up where we left off last time, which was we are talking about saving the world and saving the universe. Just a little something to do in our spare time when we have nothing better to do. So saving the universe, and at least saving this world anyway, is a worthwhile project, I have determined. Your homework, let me back up before I review your homework. To recap, for somebody who may not have watched last week's show, live or on tape delay, and is now watching this one, I would say to understand today, it would be helpful to review last week's show. That gives you all the theory you need to understand what we're doing about using coherent brain waves in a group setting to modify the human collective consciousness, change paradigms, and upgrade our world. There.
That's all.
There. A 2-hour show last week summarized in one sentence. So, moving right along, your homework was to come up with a list of things that needed to be upgraded, changed, fixed, as it were, so to speak. We have over here on the side, which you online folks can't see right now, a big sheet of white paper, and Aurea Lux will be writing down the points that we agreed to. We may do this for 1 or 2 weeks, and then we're going to go into a series of group meditations using the Akadwa energy in an endeavor to start modifying paradigms. I have a few ground rules I'm going to state that are to be followed as we go through this exercise for however long it takes. First ground rule is we need to focus on the desired goal or objective, not the process of how to get there. When we focus on a process or what we in our limited state can envision as being the only ways of getting something done, we limit possibilities. To use the quantum mechanical terms I reviewed last week, we collapse the waveform too soon. So focus on objectives or outcomes. Do not focus on a specific process or a specific design solution, if you will. Remember my analogy of automobile exhaust and catalytic converters. Our desired objectives or goals cannot harm others. First, do no harm. Not second, do no harm. Or 18th, do no harm. First, do no harm. We cannot mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually harm another or interfere with their true will, except in the extreme case of self-defense where they're doing it to us first. That's a fine line right now in this world, when evil forces are actively engaged in the process of killing people. So when we talk about, was that a hand?
Kind of.
Yes, go.
So, you phrased it a little differently than I've heard it before. And so, yeah, we need to do our will, but what if our will conflicts with the will of another? So, in other words, I've never understood that we need to go overly in depth into what interfering with the will of another, because they don't even know what their will is, and how would we know what their will is?
How do you know what their will is? You don't, neither do they. But if an extreme example, I kidnap someone off the street, knock them over the head, take them home, tie them up and throw them in a deep well in my basement and throw lotion down there and tell them to put the lotion on the skin or else it gets a hose again. I think we could safely all agree that I just interfered with that individual's true will. A lot of it has to do with consent. The same thing you would use when asking someone out on a date. Oh, would you like to go out on a date? Yes, no. Oh, no. Okay, I'll go find somebody else. Yes, great. Let's go grab a pizza. The old stereotypical caveman style of dating, to knock someone over the head and drag them off by their hair, that's not acceptable. If in doubt, ask your higher self, ask your angel, pray, whatever the highest method you currently have of communicating with the divine, be it prayer or meditation or communion with your holy guardian angel or with God or Christ or whomever. Whatever is the highest method you have of communion, use that and ask, hey, I really don't like this pollution of the water over here, so I want the pollution to stop. Ask if it's acceptable to invoke that as a desired goal. The people doing the polluting, let's say it's a factory who is too lazy to properly process and dispose of their industrial waste safely, so they're just dumping it in the local waterway, where it's killing animals, it's killing plants, it's polluting farmland, it's interfering with the reproductive cycle of honeybees, which is causing death and destruction and so forth. So maybe it was the guy's true will. I want to build the best chemical factory in the world. I would contend that he didn't come in here with the true will that included poisoning half the planet as a side effect of doing this other true will, which is learning how to make cool stuff and chemicals that have a whole bunch of applications. We're supposed to be living harmoniously together on this planet, not antagonistically or in ways of killing each other. Does that answer your question?
We can talk about it later.
Well, I think it's important here.
Okay, well, I think on one hand, what you're describing is the interference in the individual wills of another. Where the exercise here, it seems, is more, as you described it, that we want to put out a positive thing, let's say, like your example of the water. Um, it doesn't, like I said initially, do, the, we need to do our will it, without harming another intentionally. But I have never heard it stated that we should consider what their will is, because I've even heard it argued in the philosophical discussions that someone like it was Hitler's will to be born into this incarnation and to do what he did, just as those who opposed him, it was their will to do so. So it doesn't seem like, in considering that we should be focused on our will and the positive image that we want to put out there, make sure that we are not enslaving or interfering with the intent or the enslaving or hurting another, harming another, and with the will that we're putting out, but that in attempting to understand the other will of an individual, in this case, brings on a lot of extra work and consideration, and just because someone has a chemical plant and they didn't set out initially to cause harm, we all know that there are those who continue to do such things and are causing harm. And they are going to be the ones that will be affected by the cleaning of the waters, because something has to stop that, in which case we would be interfering with their will.
That's a fine point, which that's a fine point. I can see that it's a fine point. And
what do you mean by 5 points?
it's a subtle difference. Where do we, with our limited human perspective, draw the line between we want to live on a clean planet and we're going to put that out there? So when is it okay to interfere with the will of the people who run the chemical plants? If it's specific, and I'll get to the comments in a minute. Looks like there's a couple questions. If we get to a specific issue where we think we have a problem, then we'll deal with that as we go. But for now, just hold that in the back of your mind as your intent. We don't want to consciously and deliberately interfere with someone's true will, which is part of divine will, unless their actions are interfering with the health, the safety, and will of others, where those others have a will that is not harming anyone else. So if you're out there feeding the homeless in a city that has enacted policies which basically are encouraging and welcoming homelessness, and then the same city enacts a policy to make it illegal to feed the homeless. And I'm using this as a very specific example that has been enacted by cities in this very state of California, and others around the country. I see it all over, where it's illegal. People get arrested for feeding the homeless and the hungry. So I would contend that that would be an example. It's like, okay, no, we have homeless, they're hungry, I have food, I'm going to feed them. You want to stop me, you're violating my will to be a good human being. So that kind of law would need to stop. I think we're not quite started in quite the way I wanted to go, but it was a very good question. So let me see what the folks online might be saying. Sarah's now here. She's having problems with the video. Now it's working.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Everybody is waving at you vigorously. See, look at that vigorous waving. ongoing activities harm others and or interfere with the true will of others, it is acceptable to have a goal that that behavior is stopped. That is the final ground rule. Which, if I just read my ground rules, that might have answered the question a lot easier. Nick.
All I was going to say about that is that if we, you know, in the example you gave of feeding the homeless, I think if we put out a general intent that we'd like to, you know, homelessness to be reduced, and trust, again, like we said, that we shouldn't limit ourselves by not knowing the means of that. It's not, doesn't seem like it's really our place to figure out how all that's going to happen. That we're putting out a collective vision of what we want to have happen. In which case, we're not specifically addressing anyone who could be a potential problem and could be it could be their will to. You know,
so this is putting into action an idea that I threw out in one of my blogs a week or two ago, which says, "What if you woke up and the world was perfect?" And the premise is, what would we complain about then? Because we spend a lot of time complaining, and we don't spend enough time offering solutions. So,
good point.
This activity that we're engaging in is A, offering up solutions, and B, starting the process through the collective consciousness of putting it into action. So, I have something I'm going to read here. And then I am just going to open up the floor to inputs of what we would like to see changed or improved in our world. What I'm about to read is something I call the Humanity Manifesto. And this is an excerpt from my new book that's forthcoming. And so I'm just going to go ahead and read this statement. I acknowledge and support the unlimited and abundant nature of the universe. I acknowledge the holistic nature of the human organism, body, mind, and spirit. I support the optimal growth of each individual on the planet. I support the freedom of each individual to pursue their own growth and the lofty goal of their existence in the manner of their choosing, insofar as their methods do not interfere with the rights of others. I hereby denounce any and all practices which interfere with this process. That is an attempt at describing a mindset that would be held in a society that was truly striving to become the prototypical utopia that was described back in the 1500s. Can't remember the author right now, I'll have to look him up. Who described this perfect world, which is called utopia, where everything is perfect. So, what do you want to fix? And if those of you watching online have things about the world you would like to see fixed, please type it into the chat.
Housing for the homeless.
Say again?
Housing for the homeless.
Housing for the homeless. Okay. Can you be...
Like tiny houses. There's some places.
Is that a solution, an objective, or a design solution?
solution.
It's a design solution. Housing for the homeless is good. Let's write that down, so that we don't have anyone homeless unless it's their will to be.
Yeah.
Can I just? Does it have to be up while we're
No,
doing
it doesn't. It can be anywhere you want like it to be.
Or in front of you, so you don't have to stand up.
What does Sarah have to say? Her computer decided to shut down randomly. Now the video isn't working, so I'm listening on my phone. Okay. All right, Maria has one here that we need to talk about. The volcanic activity should be quelled, both oceanic and terrestrial. Let's talk about that. Would you do, either of you here in the audience agree with that?
Can you read it again?
The volcanic activity should be quelled, both oceanic and terrestrial.
Why?
Yeah, that's my question. Why, Maria? Why do you want to turn off the process by which the planet rejuvenates itself? I'll wait for her answer to appear. Any other thoughts on should we include stopping volcanism?
I don't think you can.
Well, that's not for us to decide whether we can or not.
Yeah.
The question is, should we?
Isn't that the true will of the earth?
The true will of the planet could be involved here because the planet is an intelligent, sentient being.
So aren't we interfering with the true will of that process?
If we stop volcanism, I would probably say yes.
But if we're worried about interfering with the will, then we really need to tap into the will of Gaia and find out whether it's in her best interest or not.
Okay, so Maria is worried that the volcanoes going off are going to kill a lot of people.
Okay? Some of us think that's a good thing, Maria.
I don't know if you heard that, Maria, but it's like depending on which people, we're not necessarily. It was a tongue-in-cheek comment. That may not be a downside. Here's something I want to throw out by way of volcanoes. And bear in mind, my answer about volcanoes includes the fact that I have chosen to live at the base of a volcano. It's right over there. So in the olden days, if there was a volcano, if there was a river that flooded regularly, people didn't live there. They lived somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The natives didn't live here on this land.
No, the Native Americans in this area didn't live on the base of Shasta. They went up Shasta, they did ritual ceremony, but not above a certain level, and then they would leave and go all around, but they wouldn't live right there because things go boom in the night sometimes. I grew up on the edge of a river estuary, very large river in the state of Washington called the Snohomish River. And every now and then, because of snow in the Cascade Mountains, the Snohomish River Valley would flood in the spring. You'd have a lot of rain, you'd have a lot of snow, a lot of melt off, and things would come along, and it was no big deal because nobody lived there. I remember in about 1965, we had just moved to that town on the edge of the river, and the river flooded, and there's one farmhouse out in the middle of this valley for 20 miles, and the farmer had to be rescued. I remember a picture in the paper of a motorboat coming in, taking half a dozen people away, and that was it. All the other farmers who used the nice, flat, fertile valley for farming and pastures and whatnot, they lived up on the hills on the side. Well, now you fast forward about 25 years, and people had decided to buy up all that nice, flat farmland that's easy to build on, and there's housing tracts out there. And we got one of those once every 25-year floods, and hundreds of homes were washed away or endangered, and people had to be evacuated. It was a disaster, an emergency. It goes a lot like building major cities like New Orleans below sea level, and you live on the coast of the ocean. True fact. Go look it up. Most of New Orleans is below sea level, and they keep it dry by building dikes. And when the contractors who were paid to build the dikes pocketed money and built lousy dikes, they collapsed, and a lot of people got flooded, and we had a disaster. So don't live below sea level, especially on the ocean coast. Don't live in river valleys, and don't live where volcanoes can blow up a whole state. Wyoming. So anyway, let's see what other comments we have. We have what you read from your book, this is from Melody, was basically putting my ideas into words. Also, I feel the volcanic activities are part of the planet's free will and shifting. Okay. And Sarah says, before we start, I believe it's important to learn about our emotions and what they mean in relation to our vibration, because the higher our vibration, the more powerful we'll be in creating change. Yes.
How about know thyself?
Know thyself would be a good one. Yeah, let's talk about that. Because in blogs and in these discussions recently, we've had a lot of examples where we brought up that the Earth is passing through a region of space and all the vibrations are increasing. This, to use my Star Trek term, the space-time continuum is in a process of altering the planet right now. And the human race is going along for the ride. We've caught this big wave, as the surfers say. And whether the individual humans want to or not, they're going for the big ride. And not everyone out there in the world has had shamanic training where we deliberately create chambers and open up a portal and bring in higher radiations from the higher realms. And they don't know what to do with it. And the reaction to this anxiety they're feeling, that 10 shots of espresso in 15 minutes, and how do you feel a half hour later, is fear. And they're lashing out in a lot of fear-based actions. They are basically displaying the age-old response to fear, which is control. They want to control everything, which means everything, if that's allowed to continue, everything comes to a grinding halt. So you can't have an evolutionary process and have things stay the same. And that's really what the fear-based reactions to is not just stay the same now, but go back to the way they were 10 years ago, or 50, or 100, or 1,000.
Or just not change.
Or just stay here. And there's an old adage that if you aren't going forward, you're falling behind by definition, because everything else is going forward. So we have to, when we put things down on this list, we need to be focusing on our emotions. Is this a fear-based reaction, or is it a love-based reaction? Is it a reaction based on a knee-jerk response to a hot button from one of the politicians? Any of them? Or is it a true desire to serve the future and the growth of humanity? We want to do the latter and not the former. So, excellent comment about emotions. Melody says, could we instead put our intention toward less loss / adequate, I'm trying to figure out what word this is. I think she means precognitive, but it's spelled wrong. I think that's what she means. Precognitive insight to those who most nearby during these natural occurrences to make it to safety, if it is in fact their true will. Yeah, let's talk about that. We can, Melody, why don't you keep track of that one? Sarah, our emotions tell us what kind of vibration we are giving off. If we are giving off the high vibrations of peace, love, joy, appreciation, we won't have to worry about interfering with true love. True. I like that.
I notice there's a lot of racism happening. I think white privilege is a good thing to work on.
Well, yeah, I would stop before you get to the white privilege part, because there is a lot of problem with racism, and it's on both sides.
Right,
So, or not, it's on all fronts.
right.
And I think that it's difficult because we have this melting pot that here in America, where in other cultures they seem to be more culturally tolerant, even though their country is more culturally predominant. So over in Europe, you might be in a country where you've only got one type of people, but they seem to be more tolerant of differences of those around them. So I think if we not, focus so much on, where this intolerance is coming from, because in one level it comes from a lot of different directions. But yeah, there's a lot coming out right now, and there's things coming out of the woodwork that even I had no clue about.
I really need a tech person here one of these days. The racism is a good comment, and I want to include that in our list. Is that the goal is to basically have no discrimination for any artificial means.
And that means disabilities.
That means disabilities, it means race, it means gender, and on down the list of things we discriminate against. Except tall people to short people. That one's okay. Right? No. So tall people, short people, skinny people, fat people, white people, black people, green people, the blue skinned with pink and purple polka dot people, they're all welcome here, provided they don't interfere with the rights of others. So the concept of white privilege, there have been great discrimination by whites against every other race. There has been great discrimination by every other race against every other race, all over the world. The notion that only whites discriminate is and I want to be very clear that in a country where white races were dominant for a couple of hundred years, it appears that that's what's going on. But I want to remind people that almost 1 million white people died in the Civil War fighting to end slavery. The slavery in question, most of the slaves were black. Some were white. Most of the people fighting in the Southern Army were white. Some were actually black. And then, of course, the Northern Army had mostly white, but a lot of black. The famous movie with Morgan Freeman and Matthew Broderick called Glory was an enactment of a true historical event where a white officer, Matthew Broderick, was the commander of a all-black regiment, and they were fighting in the Civil War, and most of the regiment died, including the white officer, while trying to take a Confederate fort. So the history is complex. The people on this continent who have the right to be first in line to complain about racism are the Native Americans, who've lost millions in the last 500 years. So our goal is to eliminate discrimination in all its forms and create a world where everyone is valued for their potential and their contributions, and no one is held back or denied access to anything based on an arbitrary classification. So let's call it no discrimination. I'm making that broader than
I
just
wrote
race.
cultural tolerance, but what do you want to call it?
Well, you can include that.
But I didn't hear what you said.
Is that we want to create a world where there is no discrimination. Know thyself, precognitive, very true. Comment about Sarah. Sarah says, okay, Melody, I was just about to read something and it went away. So, self-sustainable communities, water catch systems and gardens without borders, all races, beings working together towards the greatest good of all. I like part of that, Melody. Part of it is a design solution. Water catch systems and gardens. What if we learn true alchemy and we manifest all our food out of the background radiation? We don't need gardens.
So I put down self-sustainability.
Self-sustainability is good. Nutrient-dense, community-grown food and holistic healthcare. I like holistic healthcare. Available to all vehicles used for any type of travel. All building structures and devices are run on free energy. Yeah, I like that. The free energy thing is good because that's available now and it's not being used. So non-polluting technologies might be a better way of saying it, because what we envision today and classify as free energy, there might be better things to use. Think also in terms of, and Melody's last comment is starting to go there. If you remember the 4 tiers of the pyramid of Toltec philosophy, everyone remembers that? The first is food production, farming and food production. The second was health and healthcare and healing. The third was education. And the fourth, the smallest area, was social organization. And everything in that pyramid was aimed at the concept of the spiritual transcendence of a whole society. Waking everybody up and making us spiritually able to fulfill our potential both as individuals and as a culture. What other ideas we got coming through? You work towards killing racism with kindness. You focus on sending love and forgiveness to both victims and attackers. Both sides are in need of love and understanding. Yes, I like that. I would agree with that.
Who is that from?
That is from Sarah.
Yay, Sarah.
Yay, Sarah. From kind of combining my sci-fi movie interest and these higher spiritual knowledge, I actually saw a cartoon like this once. It's a love ray. You zap them with a love ray. So instead of a Star Trek phaser that destroys them, you zap them and all of a sudden they just like experience Christ-like love and they go, oh, I get it. Oh, I get it. And people just get it. And so that's what we have with the conduit, the potential to do. You had a hand.
I just wanted to mention again EJ's online ashram.
Okay.
And so EJ's, where he's very hot to trot about a lot of the issues that have been coming up politically. In his discussion in the mornings, he talks a lot about that stuff every single day. If you get up at 6 a.m., is it 6 or 6:30?
6:30.
6:30, you can watch EJ Gold live talk about current events and so forth. And so he's pointing out what the issues are, and he can be sarcastic about it, but he's trying to make us aware. But at the same time, in the ashram, he's created a scale model of the White House. And inside of the Oval Office, there's a drumming circle. And this goes on every single day. In fact, anything that happens in the White House, part of the ashram, is all done in a very positive way of sending love and light to Donald Trump. Sending love and light to Donald Trump. Sending love and light to Donald Trump. And just so you're aware, this is happening every single day in EJ's ashram. So these are some of the kind of things that are already happening. We need to be awake. We need to see things critically, but at the same time, there is energy being put out in the ways that we're discussing already, and we're just jumping on the bandwagon with this.
We are jumping on the bandwagon, and we're using the tools we have at our disposal, one of which is the Akadwa energy. And so keep in mind too, as we go through here and we talk about these, the goal is then we're going to pick one. And we're going to have a daily meditation at a certain time, maybe 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, because everybody has different schedules. And we're going to envision one change. And then next week we'll do another, the next week another, and so forth. So, given that Toltec hierarchy of food, and then health, and I would actually include housing in with the health, and then education and social order, what other more specific themes would we like to see repaired?
Protect the water.
Protect the water. Clean water for everybody.
And no pipelines going through it.
The thing about the pipelines is it doesn't even make any sense. I mean, going back to the volcanism thing, we live on a living, breathing planet. And I don't know that we want to change that. That could cause immediate and total destruction. We don't know.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
pipelines.
The pipelines, putting something rigid on something that's moving makes no sense. And so this is the kind of limited thinking that those in power have. To run a gas line in particular across something that's moving makes no sense. And that's kind of the type of things that it's not so much that we want to tell the earth to quit moving. We might want to tell it to be gentle, like what I kind of wrote about. I was trying to word everything to be positive. So I wrote non-violent volcanism. So in other words, that the people that live close have a chance to get out or to make arrangements or whatever. But again, as you brought up, if we have a choice to live on a volcano and it starts to show signs of going off, it would be great to have some warning about that.
Yeah, and usually there is. I grew up in Washington State, as most of you know, and I was in college when Mount St. Helens blew up. It started erupting little bits at a time. It had earthquakes, and everybody saw they were measuring the bulge on the north side, and this went on for months and months. And the geologist, the one made famous in that made-for-TV movie, went in and he flew in a helicopter. He got out, he climbed down into the crater and took samples. Thing could have got at any moment. And he got out and proved, yeah, this is what's going on. We need to evacuate this area. This is going to be a pyroclastic flow. It's going to be an explosive eruption, not just trickling lava coming out. And people didn't believe him. They blew him off. They lobbied the governor. They got special permission to go back in with their logging and their mining operations. And when it did erupt in a big, dramatic, violent way, keep forgetting to go back and forth between these cameras. In a big, dramatic way, 150-ish people died, including the geologists and all the miners and loggers who had gone back in and insisted on going to work, even though they were told that any day now it's going to blow up, and that was their choice, right? Mount Shasta starts doing that. I'm going to load up a few things in the truck and I'm going to hit the road. And I'll wait for it blows down, and then I'll come back and see if I have anything left. So yeah, it is a choice. But living in harmony with the planet might be some wording that we want to include. So we choose not to live in floodplains. We have an educational system that's effective enough that people say, oh yeah, that really makes no sense to live in a floodplain or on a volcano that might erupt imminently. So yeah, the Yellowstone caldera is getting active. That's something like 50 miles across. The whole thing has blown in the past. We know that from the geological evidence that has been dug up. Another one down in California that's not quite that big. There's a similar situation down by Mammoth Mountain on the eastern slopes of the Sierra. It's kind of just past where the Cascade Mountains end and the Sierras start. That one might go, probably not as dramatically as that. So does that mean that Montana people need to move? Some of them, yeah.
Can you go over again what's in the Toltec pyramid? It was food at the bottom.
Farming and food production is the foundation. That's the lowest level. The next one up is health.
And then education.
Then education, and then social structure and legal. But you got to have a little bit of that. As soon as you get more than 2 or more people in a room, there's going to be conflicts that have to be resolved. Like, which way do you have the toilet paper coming off the roll? You know, that probably needs to be included in our Toltec philosophy of the future of the world. Let's see what other comments are coming in.
I like to see something about just have a stop fracking and have other means of alternative fuel.
Well, let's talk about that. Let me check one thing here. Work with all the natural resources that nurture instead of harming. Water is a good one because the condition of the water affects entire ecosystems. The bees as well. I think she means stop killing the bees and all our pollinators, not just the bees. We can send positive energy to the earth to help it regulate itself. We can visualize people getting to safety and an abundance of resources and support by those affected by disasters. See people rebuilding and thriving. That's all from Sarah. Sarah's got some good comments going on tonight.
Well, everybody does.
Everybody does, true, but a couple of hers have been really profound. Energy. Most of the means we use right now for producing energy are horribly inefficient and horribly polluted. Everyone says go solar, put solar panels on, but the process of manufacturing solar panels is actually extremely toxic and polluted.
And they can't be recycled, and eventually they'll have to be replaced.
Yeah, they can't be recycled, they will need to be replaced, and then you're stuck with disposing of toxic solar panels.
Same with the Prius car battery.
Prius car batteries. There's a lot of things out there. What I want to mention, just as a teaser for this book that will hopefully, one way or the other, it will come out before year's end. If I haven't lined up the right big publisher, it's going to be published. I'll self-publish it and self-produce it and enlist some help for marketing. I talk in there, I have some vignettes towards the end of the book, one of which is about transportation and energy. And I talk about the fact, well, okay, we're using internal combustion engines, we're stuck in traffic, we're having road repair issues, we're going all over the world fighting wars to get more oil, Oil companies, of course, are funding all that. We have roughly, the automobiles currently in use get between 30, at the high end, between 30 and 50 miles per gallon of gas or diesel. Diesel, ounce per ounce, same kind of vehicle, a diesel engine gets between 25 and 40% better gas mileage. There's technological ways that fuel delivery could be altered so that we will increase fuel efficiency by between 5 and 10 times. Simple changes to carburation systems and fuel injection systems. And they've been tested and done and patented, and the patents brought up where inventors have been murdered or found mysteriously dead, and none of this has ever made it to market. We have right now today, we don't need any gasoline. We have 2 or 3 different ways of using existing technology to run internal combustion engines on water. Yes? Water. Good idea. So the pollution from a water-powered engine is water vapor, steam, and there's no toxic chemicals. So that's one way we could be doing it. But then there's the so-called free energy devices, which you could put an electric motor in your engine and hook it up to a free energy device that's under your hood, and you're extracting energy from the quantum field, the background field of energy, and you're running on that, and then there's zero pollution. So there's a lot of ways, and you can put one of those generators in your house in about the same amount of space that we currently would have in a laundry room. You could have all your power generation right there. These are existing technologies. There's a lot of possible solutions. So the goal is non-polluting transportation, non-polluting energy production for our homes and businesses. What else we've got coming in? See people rebuilding and thriving. It's all good, way better than, oh, no, I'll leave that one alone. Cherie says, I just can't type fast enough. Well, type slow, Cherie. And feel free to send us emails on this. We're not going to pick one tonight to start meditations on next week. We're going to do at least one more week of brainstorming if it seems appropriate.
What about harmony in the House and Senate, that they start not working for the political party, but
working for the people who
Yeah.
hired them? I would describe that as all our leaders, not just in one political organization like the U.S. Congress, but all leaders being truly altruistic, being the statesman rather than the politician, and leading for both short-term and long-term sustainability of the human race and planet.
Yeah, because 45 is making threats to Iran, and war threats.
What was the punchline to that genie joke? That's what we want.
Yeah, so there was a joke I read online, probably not too long ago. Somebody did something good, and the genie pops out of the bottle and says, okay, you get one wish. And the woman says, okay, I want to live forever. And the genie says, "Oh, I am constrained by God. That's one wish I am not allowed to grant. That's the only wish I can't grant. You know, you want to be smarter, prettier, faster, whatever. I can do that. I can't allow you to live forever. That was beyond my pay grade." So the woman sits back, thinks and thinks. Okay, I've got my wish. I want to live until one day, past the time, when all the politicians in Congress in every country on the planet are working for the long-term good of humanity, altruistic, for true sustainability for the short-term and the long-term benefit of the human race and the planet. And the genie looks at the woman and says, "Oh, you sneaky little son of a gun." But she got around the first one because the genie knew that's never going to happen. But the genie should have trusted that us Toltecs were going to get together and conspire to create a world where it would happen. So that's what we need. We need leaders committed to the best and highest good of all concerned and the benefit of all beings everywhere, and the short and long-term good of all concerned, including the planet. What we really need is we need to go back to the original definitions of liberal and conservative, and then merge the best of both of those definitions. So the original definition of conservative is you conserve. You don't waste resources, you conserve. You take care of. A conservatory, you know, that's like a museum where something gets preserved for the future. And the liberal was more akin to being free with abundant resources to help those in need. That's where the concept started. And when you look at the way both political parties behave, neither party behaves the way their original roots were set up, and neither party is behaving in the manner to meet our criteria. So we need a governance system
that works for the people.
It works for the short and long-term good of all concerned,
Right.
including the planet.
May the government do no harm.
First, do no harm. That line, in case you don't recognize it, comes from the Hippocratic Oath. And it's one of the first things in it. I got mine in a frame around here somewhere, where the naturopathic profession, we modified it from the traditional profession as it was written by Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, back around 400 BC-ish in Greece. And that was like the first line in Hippocratic Oath is, first, do no harm. Don't make the patient worse. Well, in this case, the patients involved are number one, the planet, and number two, the human race. Number three, all the other life forms on the planet. And almost every government policy from many governments, and especially of ours, is violating that first do no harm clause of proper care and feeding the human race. What else we've got coming in? Nothing more.
Maybe we could work on something about business ethics for corporations and whatnot.
Not just ethics.
How about just ethics?
Yeah, ethics.
The one area that hasn't been discussed at all so far, so I'm going to throw this little bomb out there and see what comments that precipitates, is spirituality. Right now, in our country in particular, but all over a large part of the world, the very notion of spirituality, its cousin religion, and its father and mother, God, is under attack. Any doubts, get on Facebook, get in any major media outlet, and look at the reading between the lines whenever they cover anything about spirituality or religion. There is a great attempt right now to deny the existence of God, and hence anything that flows from that, such as standards of how we should be caring for each other and treating each other, the very notion of spirituality and ethics and morals. Oh, you can't enforce ethics and morals because that's judging somebody. Oh, but they're a murderer. Oh, but that's judging. Maybe there's a reason they murdered. Yeah, it probably was. And that doesn't mean murder is correct. So that's obviously the most extreme example. But we need an ethical solution to the notion that the atheists are trying to put out on everybody, which is freedom of religion in their minds means freedom from religion. And that's not what our Constitution says. The Constitution says, I should have had it out here, that government shall make no law pertaining to the exercise, or Congress shall make no law in regulating the practice of religion or in prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And that's the one that's being interfered with the most. Oh, you want to have a prayer? Oh, I'm sorry, you can't, because somebody who doesn't believe in God will be offended. Well, if that's the standard you want to take, you just interfered with my free exercise of religion. So we have to have a sense of ethics that on the one hand allows the atheist to go off and worship according to whatever it is they worship, however they worship it. But it can't interfere with the other 90% of the world who does believe in God. Actually, it's more like 98%. 2 or 3% is the only, what I've looked at on statistics, only 2 to 3% of the world does not believe in God. The rest of us believe in something. Many of us have problems with organized religion. So ethics and morals and open acknowledgement of the spiritual and the divine.
So maybe that all goes back to education.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it's part of it.
Because ethics isn't taught like it's a college level course.
Right, it used to be
why
grade
isn't
school.
it? Yeah, why isn't it taught earlier?
Why isn't it taught in the home?
Yeah, and spirituality, why isn't that taught? Because
It should be.
I have a friend, client that in Ireland, they were fairy curriculum was part of the norm. I mean, that was one of the courses that they took.
Yeah, that's
and also gardening.
Gardening.
Yeah.
I mean, I was gardening by the time I was 5 or 6. We moved to a place where we had room for garden, and that was just before my 5th birthday in the fall. And the next spring, we started gardening. So I had just turned 5. And I was out there. I had no clue what I was doing. My dad said, okay, dig this here and put these seeds here and water this. And, a month later, food appeared. So, yeah, farming, gardening.
I kind of wanted to mention sustainability. And in one way, this kind of goes back to Maria's comments about the volcanoes and, the earth changes and that people can die. And quite frankly, we were past a sustainable point in many parts of the world, and even here in America, that we just simply cannot support the populations that we have. Now, that doesn't mean we wish a big, earthquake would take out half of them, but through people's own self-consciousness about the issue, and that there needs to be some kind of a period of time where we get back into a rational balance of sustaining ourselves and quite frankly, a good portion of the world is dependent on others, and because of this, and there's kind of a false sense there because they think they're independent and they're free and they're doing whatever they want and they're making choices, but in some ways that's enslaving others on the other side of the world.
Right.
And so,
Right.
by making healthy-minded choices that with the sustainability model in mind by each individual, that we can at least rebalance some of these things. And just even a welfare mom, okay, yeah, we all get in trouble, we all have issues, but are you going to continue to have children in order to get welfare checks or are you going to learn how to be self-sustainable?
Right. The concept of self-sufficiency and sustainability. Sustainability denotes that the process is self-replicating and continues into the future ad infinitum, ongoing. So all the animals and plants living in a certain biosphere have all their needs met. They have food, they have clean water, they have clean air, and the predators are in balance with the prey animals, and the prey animals are in balance with the natural food production. And without any outside interference, this just continues to go on. This is what I call living in the wild. And in a lot of my nutritional health writings and public speaking, I talk about what would a human look like, humans living in the wild, right? What would we eat? Well, we don't eat processed chemicals because living in the wild, they weren't available. So our bodies, our biological machines, still are designed for the way we lived in the wild, 100,000 years to 1,000,000 years ago. And we need to get back to that, living in that. So whole food, this is all part of the thing of the lowest tier of the Toltec pyramid is food production. And we're starting to get us a few more comments in there. So I'm going to read a couple of the items on my list. So this is a book in a chapter trying to implement the Humanity Manifesto that I read earlier. Require that all food grown, produced, and sold in the U.S., I would change that to the whole world, meets the highest standards of certified organic foods. And that would include all feed given to animals that would then be eaten. 100, and while mass media and our watered down educational system might want you to think that's impossible, up until roughly 100 years ago, this was actually the norm. 100 years ago, there was no conventionally grown food versus organic grown food. There was only one thing on the market, and that was called food, and it was all, by today's standards, organic. Eliminate all genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, and ban their production, growth, import, and export. Every time we try to play God and tinker with biology, especially at the genetic level, really bad things tend to happen. Right back to the day when Mendel was tinkering and doing some of the initial genetic experiments, because he's the one who discovered the whole genetic concept. And he bred a type of bee. He was actually producing killer bees back some 500 years ago, trying to increase honey production. And what he did was he produced an overly aggressive type of bee that had the potential to kill people, and so he had to destroy and burn all his hives of those bees. So when the later people in the late 20th century were trying to produce, the Africanized honeybees, aka killer bees, if they had just gone back and read Mendel's work, which was published, they would have found out that, this isn't such a good idea. So the genetically modified food thing is huge. I'm kind of jumping around in my book here. We have a lot of toxins in our world. Man-made chemicals, radiation, things of that nature. And thousands of new chemical substances are being produced in industry each year. They're being released into the environment. They're showing up in our food, in our body care products, in our water supplies, in our air that we breathe. And none of them are being tested for safety on humans or safety on plants and animals in the environment. And there is no requirement that they be tested. So that is a big, broad category that pretty much covers everything that's been discussed tonight about pollution, including the chemtrails. Somebody had a comment about the chemtrails. The chemtrails is a larger issue. I may want to defer that one, other than to insert the South Park voice of Mr. Mackey, the school counselor, right here. It says, okay, chemtrails are bad, okay? Don't do chemtrails. There's a large agenda behind the chemtrails that we can discuss, and I don't necessarily want to go there, other than to say it's part of a larger agenda to take freedom from people and keep humans enslaved, and to deny free will to humanity. If you want more details, go research United Nations Agenda 21 and look up the topics of geoengineering as well as chemtrails. And you can read all about it. And it's all bad. And so when we look at the type of desired world we have, and a government that has society's and humanity's best interests at heart, that will be eliminated if we produce. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question, because some of this stuff is really hard to wrap your head around, and we've been trying to do this for quite a while. And you can look at the individual issues and theoretical ways of solving these things, but really there's a bigger picture thing where we've become a global world. So it's not a big deal to air goji berries over here for the vegans because that's what they want to do. So in one way we get into that interfering with will stuff, but so let's just say that after a bunch of discussion and we went around and round and round and round, we all decided that the best thing was to live in smaller, self-sustaining communities. So in other words, that at least in your bioregion, that you've got the basic foods and housing and clean water that you need to sustain your local population. Clearly there's those that are going to suffer because they're involved in this global market thing. None of us want to have our ability taken away to, order things online that were made in China, But clearly this globalism is part of this problem. And, I think I've mentioned before the Hopi Survival Kit by Thomas E. Mayle is basically the Hopi's instructions to us white people to the stuff that's happening has been prophesized, that it's going to happen. It's not like we can circumvent that, But how quickly it comes, how severe it is, and how quickly we recover depends on what we do right now. And their message is basically to live simple, to, you know, to live in a self-sustaining kind of community, and, you know, not take such a big impact on the earth. Well, even for those of us who I think have the most altruistic intentions, that would all hit all of us a little hard, especially if we live in the city.
Mhm.
So, I don't know what I want to really say about that, other than maybe that can be one of the points that we think about when we come back to this discussion. And some of our ideas is that this really is much, much bigger than a lot of us would like to think.
Maybe it's materialism.
That's part of it, I think.
Yeah, materialism. There's no easy way around this, so I'm just going to talk about it, which is this is part of the ultimate ongoing spiritual battle. We're in a spiritual war of light and dark, good and evil. You know, Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Darth Vader, and any kind of representation like that you care to talk about. And when you live in a secular world out there that denies the existence of God, denies the existence of ethical standards, and you try to talk about, yeah, there's this corruption is coming from the dark side. It's trying to undermine the freedom of the people and trying to undermine humanity's attempt to raise up to something higher. They look at you the way I look at somebody who really believes the earth is flat. What? How could you think that? You know, because they've been dumbed down. You know, they've drunk the Kool-Aid with the fluoride in the water. So we have to acknowledge that that's part of what's going on. We need to go in the direction of sustainability. The Hopis said it well. The Earth is changing. The space-time continuum is changing, and stuff's coming down. You see it in society, whether it's going to be war that does it in, or whether it's purely geological changes, or whether it's the second coming of Christ, or whatever comes, something is going to happen. It's been prophesied for many, many centuries. And whether it's biblical, or whether it's the Hopi, or whether it's the Aborigines, or whether it's whatever system of prophecy you choose to look at, the time we are in right now has been prophesied. You know, cobwebs would be spun in the sky in the last days, according to the Hopis. And you look up at the sky and you see really beautifully drawn cobwebs with these chemtrails. And no amount of propaganda can change the fact that they're poisonous and there is evil intent behind that. And assume just for a moment that all the conspiracies are true. There have been very few conspiracies over the last, let's say, 25 years that have been proven not true. Every prophecy, oh, you guys are nuts, wacko, conspiracy theorists. And then you fast forward 5, 10, 20 years, oh, it was true. Of all the ones that have been disclosed, none of those whack job prophecies from 20 or 30 years ago, none of them have been proven false. So, what do we do about that? We upgrade. We change the paradigm. This is a spiritual battle. We will win it with spiritual warfare techniques. That means changing our consciousness individually. That means I'm going to sit down, I'm going to look at all these suggestions that have come through and on the chat, and I'm going to either put out an email or put out a blog. I haven't decided which. Kind of organizing and listing these. And I want everyone to think about all of these. And tentatively, we weren't going to meet next week, but I think we are. We were going to take the last week of this month on, the first week of next month off, and I'm going to change that up. I think we need to continue this next week. Then the first week of August, we're off. And then we'll kind of regroup from there. Because I want to get these meditations set up and going when we pick one.
We need to look at the calendar because there's reasons why we weren't doing that. And
Okay.
that doesn't mean that we can't have a student group online discussion, independent of broadcasting to the world.
Okay. That might be what we need to do then.
I wondered if you wanted to look at these now and show them what we've written.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to turn this up, and I'll turn this camera
I
around.
was just going to hand it to you.
Oh, let's just do this. Oh, I have to like switch cameras.
Show and tell.
I know. Can you guys see that?
You want me to hold it while you talk?
I'm going to switch cameras again. Because this one has more light on it. There we go. So this is really old-fashioned, low-tech scrolling
And you can't look at my spelling. I don't see the spelling.
from television. Okay. So, those are the things. We're going to organize it. We're going to send you an email or a blog or both. And next week, if I don't have my scheduled lines crossed up, we'll keep that informed, and we will send just to the students if we can't do a live broadcast next week. We're going to pick one to start. We'll talk about these maybe a little more, and then we're going to pick, let's say, our top 3 in order that we're going to be meditating on. And then we're going to discuss the specific meditation technique that I want to use when we do this group meditation. So, we're changing the world. Think of it as like the big wave is here, and we can either learn to surf and control our destiny, or we will get swallowed up by the maelstrom, and who knows what happens then. So this is proactivity in action. It is Toltec philosophy in action, and using our Toltec tools of consciousness in action. Any questions? Let's see what we got online. Oh, that's a good comment Sarah had. I think we can promote and inspire lifestyle changes in others by living that way ourselves. We can't control what everyone else does, but we can do the work, and it will affect the people open to it. And she has when she started eating healthier, it affected other people.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Sarah. 100% correct. Be the change you want to see in others. One of the famous somebody said that. And I've seen it in action more times than I can count, especially with respect to health. Any questions?
We need to give Sarah an opportunity to tell us where we're at with the.
Oh, right. Sarah. Well, Melody said something about the 100th monkey thing, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, we have a question about the room at the Red Bluff Auditorium thing. And do you have any more answers yet on that?
Yeah, well, really, we need to set up a time when we can talk about it. We just need to know if it's still on.
Yeah, so nothing coming in yet. So we background for everybody else watching, we're trying to get a date and time set up for an Akadwa event in Red Bluff.
In October.
In October. I think it's the last Saturday of October. And communications have been challenging. And everybody beware that Mercury retrograde is starting soon.
Right.
So we need to be more conscious and deliberate with our communication attempts. Okay, we'll follow up on that one offline.
So Saturday would be the 27th?
I think
I
it is
thought it was the
October.
28th, but
Well, that's a Sunday.
okay, of October.
27th is a Sunday.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
Okay, we don't have all the answers. This was more of a question for Sarah since we had her online.
It
So-
had the intent was we need to have a group discussion about it. We need to set a day and time for that if that's the way we want to
Okay.
proceed.
So we're going to be having a group discussion. We may set it up via video conference, or it may just be audio phone conference. But that's going to happen soon to plan this potential October event. So that's what's coming here.
The other thing is that we are looking into a venue for where the next shamanic day would be, and that was supposed to have been an overnighter. And we may be contacting you about potentially postponing that until September, just so that we can get the right place for it. So we'll let you know more about that, but I just wanted to let you know about next month that it's kind of tentative right now.
Okay.
Yeah, let me know in advance and I'll make sure I hold that weekend or whatever.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions from our online gang?
Oh, we gotta
She-
figure out, is Sarah and Cherie gonna do the Saturday, August 11th?
Okay, so we still, let me just report on that. The August 11th, 12th thing in Sacramento is a little more expensive because it's 2 days. And so, and because it's coming up quickly, I need to talk to the guy tomorrow to find out whether we can, still get a spot, what the price for the 2 days are going to be, payment arrangements on it, because we don't have the money until after the 1st to secure the spot. So as soon as I have that done, then I'll give you all probably a call personally to make those arrangements. But in the meantime, if you know whether you can or cannot work one of those 2 days in Sacramento, let me know so that I can figure that out.
I could just tell them what day I'm available, so it depends. Sarah said that before that she prefers a Saturday.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And Sarah says she has it reserved for the 27th, and she moved it to a smaller room that's half the price, and she has not put down a deposit either. Come to the class. She wants us to come Saturday. Well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to because of a prior commitment. So we'll have to see. Any other questions about tonight's list development and planning for this meditation change the world activity?
What do you want us to do until the next time?
Okay, we're going to be putting out an email and or a blog tomorrow with this information typed up in some kind of logical order, and then I want you all to be thinking about priorities. We will
Think
come
about what, I'm sorry?
priorities.
Okay.
We need to come to a consensus on which we will do first and second and third, and after third we'll regroup. So that's what we're going to do.
Change the world.
Change the world.
Can you make a reminder about the reading assignments? Because at some point we need to talk about those. So if someone's having an issue getting books or needs to know what you want them to be reading.
Okay. As a reminder, the 4 required books are, number 1, The Training and Work of an Initiate, and number 2, Esoteric Orders and Their Work, both by Dion Fortune. Number 3 is The Teachings of a Toltec Survivor by Coyote the Blind. And number 4 is The Human Biological Machine as a Transformational Apparatus by E.J. Gold. I would like you to read all 4 of those and then write a paper. Do not regurgitate what's in the books. I already know what's in the books. I would like the paper to represent what you learned, what your thoughts are based on this material, how you might be able to apply that on your personal practice and your spiritual path. Anything about them that you found useful, that you agreed with, that you thought was ridiculous and stupid and you will never, ever, 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 ever do that, whatever your thoughts are. There's no right answers or no wrong answers. The idea is I want to see evidence that you've read it, because once you read it, the transformation effects of that material start. That's the goal.
Do you want to show this to the girls or online or?
I'll bring it over to this camera and hold it up. Our Toltec artist, our resident Toltec artist, Yvonne, has yet another Akadwa Toltec artwork. No. The camera's here.
Oh.
Come around. Stop.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you like to say about this, Yvonne?
It's an eagle.
It's an eagle. I see it, and it's lovely. And I hope you don't get mugged on your way back to your car tonight and have that taken from you. That would be terrible, right here in my own parking lot.
And also too, since I got this as a tool, you can share this, John Kirby.
Oh, hold it up. You're on camera, I'm not.
Oh.
Right now. So this is an amazing tool. It's selenite and scullocite, and it's a healing tool. It's an outstanding conductor of healing energies. This is some of the Toltec artwork done by John Kirby, a local Mount Shasta resident, and a Kadwa holder and Toltec artist.
There's
So,
also sabers. We're going to have some smaller ones at the fair.
yeah. All right. Thank you for sharing very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna go offline, and we are going to resume at a time and place TBD. So check your email tomorrow, and or check for a new blog tomorrow. Any other questions? Going once, going twice, and gone. Thank you very much.
I've only been doing this since April.
Feels longer, huh?
I know.
April 2nd.
Oh wow. That's good. April.
I am on the
June,
fast
July.
track.
So you're just barely 3 months anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Almost 4. But no, that's why we keep poking people.
mhm.
You guys like do your personal practice, practice your work.
So where do you could get a Jaguar picture like that?
The only person who has one like that is me. I created that.
That's cool.
So what did you feel as far as Jaguar energy tonight?
Mm-mm.
Specific?
It was just lurking around and not lurking, but
In the shadows.
perusing around and just like sit next to him and just it's on the matrix in the foreground but in the background simultaneously.
Yeah, my Jaguars ran away tonight. Maybe because Mina didn't stick around and Smokey didn't come. Oh, Mina's here. She is here. Last I saw her, she was running.
Yvonne, would you like some pie and ice cream?
Sure. Thanks.
Pine ice cream?
Pine ice cream.
I didn't know we had any pine ice cream. I thought all we had was vanilla.
I think Bobo wants some.
Oh, Pogo wants anything we're doing.